For more than 2 years, the world has seen the worst pandemic, a once-in-a-century event which has altered the lives of millions around the world. Millions have died, and the pandemic is not really over. One of the groups which has been instrumental in trying to help millions around the world, the Serum Institute of India, the AstraZeneca vaccine, what we call Covishield in India, has had a huge role. Adar Poonawalla with me over here in Davos in Switzerland. Thanks very much for being with us. You know, when we first started speaking about vaccines a couple of years back, the real hope was Covishield, and it still continues to generate so much hope in our country. I just got my booster jab about 2 weeks, just about 2 weeks back. But the question I really want to ask you is, when are we going to be prototyping a vaccine which deals with all the strains of COVID?
Well, you know, that's well put, because the next generation vaccines, given enough time for research and development, should ideally be able to even block transmission.
Right.
What we saw this time around was great vaccines that could prevent hospitalizations and severe disease. But as you rightly said, you know, to deal with future mutant variants and to prevent breakthrough infections. The real research is on now, which does take a little bit of time. And maybe in a year or two, we could see, you know, a second generation vaccine that could prevent transmission also. And that's how you really work toward eradicating or minimizing the spread of a disease.
And are you in talks with groups looking to develop this technology? I mean, are we going to see an Indian second generation vaccine is my question.
I hope so, certainly hope so, but you know, it's still very early. I think we should wait at least a year and we'll know by then. But you know, even the research at the moment is based on combining the COVID vaccines with flu vaccines. And that could be an ideal booster for people to take every year. You know, where you just have one jab and it takes care of, you know, a family of viruses.
Because that's the other point. We've all had our boosters now, but we'll need another booster until such time as there is a next generation drug available. So I mean, to say that we need to have our next booster 1 year later is hoping against hope that it lasts that long, and it doesn't. The technology, I mean, we know the science now much better than we did a few years back.
Well, I mean, if you take 3 shots, the data is very clear that you do have immunity, you know, beyond a year. At least Covishield and the AstraZeneca vaccine has a very good T-cell response, a long-term response, which is why you're seeing, you know, the cases in India and the hospitalizations, most importantly, at a much lower level compared to, let's say, the US or other parts of Europe, where, you know, other vaccines have been used, which are equally good, but they don't have that long-term T-cell response that we're looking at with the traditional vaccines.
We'll talk more about vaccines in a bit, but you know, you're here in Davos because you really are hoping to bring together leaders around the world to sort of be in a position to deal with pandemics better.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's one part of it.
So I mean, I'm hoping to use the platform here and everyone, whether it's the world leaders or the multilateral organizations, to actually draft some sort of global pandemic treaty which would help the global solidarity of coming together. You know, we all know what went right and what went wrong in this pandemic, and some of the things that went wrong in terms of sharing of raw materials and vaccines, recognizing vaccine certificates, global harmonization of clinical trials and manufacturing, you know, making more vaccines accessible and treatments accessible globally. So these are the kind of things I would hope to establish, where if you had a global pandemic treaty that would address these issues, it would definitely make it easier with a predefined framework for leaders also to explain to their constituents and to deal with other countries in a predefined framework. Now, it may not be enforceable because, you know, in a crisis, a leader would do whatever they have to do to protect their country, and rightly so. But at least it offers some kind of framework and a commitment, like you see for climate change and other sort of global
Are you drafting it, Adar? Have you got a draft which is ready for circulation?
Yes. So I've been working on it, and I'm going to be circulating that at Davos in some closed door sessions as well with some multilateral organizations, and then we'll see how
Right.
it's taken up forward from there, because it has to be one of those organizations that takes it forward.
Right.
One individual country can't
Right.
do it. So
Right.
let's see how that goes.
We talk about the science of the vaccines, but has this been a real learning experience for you that, in terms of coordinating the effort to deal with a pandemic, we around the world lacked. We fell short of our own domestic requirements at a stage. We stopped exports. The UN fell short. Gavi fell short. Different manufacturers had different priorities. The science was different. The WHO was there. They took a lot of time in many cases. So lives were lost, let's face it. We don't know how many, but the process was slow.
Again, because it was a fragmented effort
Yeah.
rather than a global coordinated response.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to bring here.
Right.
So let's see what happens.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about the India situation. Now we've got Covovax. It's been granted emergency use licensure in India, but it's still difficult to get for adults. It's not there. Last I checked on CoWIN. Am I wrong? Or
Well, I think there's some procedural issues, but I think most of the adults, as you know, have been vaccinated with either Covishield
Right.
or Covaxin.
Covaxin, yeah.
So for dose 1 and 2,
Right.
I don't think there'll be many takers for Covovax. But I think, as you know, it's approved between 12 and 18, and very soon for going down to
Right.
the ages, down to the age of 2 or 3.
Right. Right.
So I think, now we need to get the children vaccinated and protected.
Right.
I think, looking at toward future mutant variants of concern,
Right.
it's important to vaccinate the children also.
Right.
So I think that's where India is at the moment, and we've done very well. Our coverage is far higher than most countries. If you look around, I think, what was it, 90%
Yeah, more
of
than
adults?
that now.
More than
That now,
90%.
yeah.
I don't think any country's
No.
reached that figure.
No, and our numbers are huge.
Yeah.
So that's good. This is a question we keep getting in the innumerable programs we've done. How do I know a vaccine is safe for my 2-year-old? How would you respond to that?
Well, a lot of data and safety. If you look at billions of doses now being used of the AstraZeneca vaccine in adults. We've had extensive studies in children as well for Covovax, which is for children. The AstraZeneca vaccine is for 18 and over.
Yeah.
So Covovax has done studies, all over
Right.
the world. We've done studies in India. And we've even started thousands of vaccinations in India for children.
Right.
So far, so good, touch wood.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
things are looking good.
Yeah. Let's talk about the other vaccines which we've discussed in the past. A nasal vaccine. You were in preliminary trials when we spoke
Yeah.
about this more than a year back. Where does that stand?
Well-
Does that still have a say potentially?
We sort of slowed down on it because how many vaccines were we
Yeah.
going to make,
Right.
given the coverage?
Right.
But to answer your earlier point, the nasal vaccines have the ability to block transmission.
You're clear about that now.
There's a higher chance of that. And if that is proven to be true in trials, then yes, as a booster, that would be ideal.
Right.
But the problem with nasal vaccines is, and even when we had a nasal flu vaccine, the uptake wasn't so good because it's very hard to establish a immune response.
Right.
Because, the IgG, IgA antibodies that you measure, you don't get that when you give a nasal vaccine.
Right.
But it does build a lot of immunity and can block in your mucosa,
Right.
preventing the virus from
Right.
entering your system, and that's
Right.
really what you need to block transmission.
Just another point, when we're talking about dealing with a global pandemic, the SII has actually invested a great deal of money in a facility where you can really move fast in expediting production. So when you talk about a response, the infrastructure, the hardware and the people who do this actually exists in our country.
Absolutely. So one of the lessons that we learned
Yeah.
was that we need to be able to vaccinate our own nation in a matter of 3 months.
Yeah.
God forbid there's another pandemic.
Yeah.
We can push the button and produce, now we have a 4 billion dose capacity from 1.5.
Right.
Pre-pandemic.
Right.
And
This is because of the new facility.
correct.
Right.
And that's added another 2 billion
Right.
doses to our capacity. So now we could technically make whatever India needs
Yeah.
within 3 months, and then immediately, export and support other nations
Yeah.
as well. Now
Yeah.
that is the level of our bandwidth, and don't forget,
Yeah.
other manufacturers also have scaled up. So India now has roughly a 6 billion dose capacity between all the Indian vaccine manufacturers combined, maybe even 7 billion.
Right.
So, we are now far better prepared in terms of capacity also going forward.
Let's talk a little bit about inequity in vaccines. That's been a huge problem in the past because we weren't allowed to export. Now we are exporting a lot more. So when it comes to made in India vaccines in other parts of the world, where do we presently stand?
Well, at the moment, as you know, we've got a lot of capacity.
Right.
And we have been exporting to more than 80, 90 countries as of November 2021. We exported a lot even in January and February before the second wave hit us. So we are in a very comfortable position. The African nations are slowly scaling up their ability to vaccinate, but as you see cases going down, the urgency for people to come forward and get vaccinated is dwindling, and that's a problem.
That
because
is a problem.
A lot of people are not even going in for their second dose as a result, and we need to at least complete their primary and secondary vaccinations. So we have to keep advocating and pushing that as we go along this year.
One final question to you. You would have seen the World Health Organization numbers on the number of COVID fatalities in India. We have our own numbers as well. But I think the key point over here that we keep forgetting is that either way the numbers are stupendous, and I think it's just a reminder of what we dealt with. It sometimes doesn't sink in. How did you deal with this entire thing, knowing that this is something that's going to be out of control? This is something which did get out of control. Did you sleep easy at any time in the last 2 years?
Well, you've been following our journey quite closely, and given the uncertainty that existed, even in terms of being able to access raw materials and things that we would normally take for granted, it was permissions and licenses, raising the capital. To do this, we invested more than 10,000 crores, between our capital and, from Bill Gates and from other countries, and India's support as well. So there were so many sleepless nights and lessons that we've learned. And I feel we're far more prepared. We can, make better decisions, faster decisions going forward. And I just hope we're never in that position again. But if we are, I'll tell you, there is no country that is more prepared than India. I mean, you look at our testing infrastructure. You look at our health systems also, and hospitals and everything. So we're in a very good place now.
What about fundamental science in making a lot of these vaccines? The SII is known as a manufacturer. Is that an area that you'd also like to sort of get into?
Well, absolutely.
Basic science.
You've got all the new vaccines, HPV, that we're going to launch, which is for cervical cancer in women later this year. Hexavalent. So we are doing a lot of research to combine vaccines, even new vaccines. We've got our own patents for the pneumococcal vaccine that we made and launched in 2019 to prevent pneumonia in children. That's one of the highest killers of children below the age of 5.
And this is science in India,
yes,
or your
yes,
international?
Yes, absolutely. We filed our own patents. We've got the strains from the US, but we've formulated and made our own vaccine. So we've got a 5-in-1 meningitis vaccine coming up as well. So a lot of the pipeline products that were sort of deferred for 2 years because I wanted to just focus on COVID will now take shape. Even dengue. We've got a dengue.
You'll have a dengue vaccine.
Yes. We're starting trials with the ICMR this year.
Phase 1.
Yes. And I think maybe in 2 years you'll have it.
This will be the world's first dengue?
No, it'll be the world's second dengue vaccine. There's one made by another company as well. But we hope to have a much higher level of efficacy. So let's wait and see how that goes.
That's going to be huge in the India context.
Yes.
Adar, before I forget, hydrogen. We've spoken enough about vaccines. You want to diversify the business at one level. I mean, you're known to, you've invested in other insurance, you were telling me.
Finance and insurance.
Finance, So, green energy, because that's what Davos is all about at one level.
No, so there's so many great people here to talk to. We've bought a Swiss company, in fact, with technology to make fuel cells and electrolyzers, which I think is key, because if you're talking about green power, green energy, you need the technology to convert solar and wind, to hydrogen, transport it. So what I'm really waiting for a country like India to expand on its infrastructure and have policies which would then make sense, where you can invest in solar and wind. Now, at the moment, it makes sense more on a captive basis, because you don't have the infrastructure to transport and use hydrogen. Maybe you use ammonia to transport as well and use it. But I think that's really the ultimate key. You talk about EVs and electric vehicles, but ultimately that power is coming from coal or.
But you're passionate about EVs, right?
Yeah.
You're passionate about nuclear also?
No. I'm saying right now the power is got to be converted.
No, I'm asking, you are passionate about electric vehicles. You drive a Tesla over here in Europe.
Yes.
Do you wish to see much more in India? The Tatas have done fantastic work. Even the Mahindras are investing heavily in electric vehicles in India, but we have infrastructure problems. I mean, where do you recharge cars? That's a big concern. But do you see that really going forward in India?
Well, yeah, I mean, you've even got a lot of startups which might be able to, if they get enough funding. I think right now the markets have been a bit soft, but if they get their funding, they can put up all the infrastructure. You have, in Europe and other parts of the world, those guys who come and change your batteries. I think you have it in a small way in India, so that you don't necessarily need to depend on charging stations. So as that ecosystem evolves, I think we're looking at a 5-year horizon for India at least till we get to a certain scale. So, and I hope we get there sooner than later, because
there's no option, is there?
So we have to move in that direction. I think India will get there in a few years.
Lovely speaking to you, Adar. Thank you very much. There you have it, Adar Poonawalla, talking among other things about the need for countries around the world to actually come together to ensure that if there is another pandemic, there's a way, there's a structure in place to ensure that can take place. In Davos, Vishnu Shobh for NDTV.